And then we have John here.
John Mack.
Hello, there he is, the man of the hour. Hey,
Hello, everybody.
so we're going to
How's it
start off
going?
with this. If
Good.
nobody knows who John Macaroon is, then you don't know what you're talking about football. So we got some breaking news here. I think it's this one. There it is.
Yes.
You want to talk about that, or we were just talking about the draft and what we're going to do? What are you going to do for the draft, John?
Well, thankfully, it's in Detroit, so it's going to be a fun time to coordinate with to see how the coverage is going to be downtown. I can't wait to see the sea of people that are going to go down there and have a good time. Which fan base, whether it be the Bears, Packers, comes into town and takes over. But to me, it's going to be great. I think I'm going to be in Allen Park. And the wildness, everybody's wondering, okay, the Lions at 29, that potentially means that the pick is going to be around 10:45 to 11 p.m. So would Brad Holmes have everybody wait all day long in Detroit, the strong amount of Detroit fans, everybody at Allen Park waiting around? Is he going to make deals? Or when number 29 comes, does he trade out of it? We write nothing and we go home. So I'm excited for it. It's a big draft. It's a big opportunity to add some talent across the board that will be the future. But what's interesting, you guys heard it. Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes kind of said, you know what? We got so much talent that probably a couple of the draft picks, maybe even on day one and day two, they may not even see the field early on because of the talent level. If they draft a lineman in the first round at number 29, they may not see the field because of the starting five. So it's a fun time, man. It's a fun time all around. I think everybody was positive hearing what was said from Dan and Brad at the owners meeting. I do think the loss of Josh Reynolds and Jonah Jackson is going to have an impact, but I think that when you see what the potential replacements are, you see, okay, Antoine Green, Jameson Williams can step up, and more targets for Laporta is fine by me. So you weren't going to pay up to $14 million for Josh Reynolds. So it was a wild week. It was a good time, and I'm just a little surprised that he went to Denver of all places, because I thought he'd go to a place where maybe he could be a number two. I think he'll still be a number three in Denver with those wide receivers in that lineup.
John, I got a quick question. Now I know you're familiar with Olu Fashanu, aren't you?
Yeah.
Tackle from Penn State. I was talking to someone earlier today because for whatever reason,
Yeah.
Olu was considered a generational talent a year ago. If he would have left at that young age, I think he was 20. If he would have left at that age, he probably would have been the number one tackle off the board a year ago. I figure the way things usually happen when you stick around a little too long, they find reasons to not like you,
Yeah.
and they find people that they like better, for the most part. Do you think? Because we all can agree guard is on the board. Do you think if the right talent at tackle fell, they would do it? Because if you look at Taylor Decker, there's no guarantee what the future holds for him in another year or so. And to me, the temptation of adding a potential elite talent at left tackle and being able to keep Panay Sewell at right tackle, and just the thought of having potential bookend Hall of Fame caliber type tackles is very, very tempting. So, with everything that we know is on the board, cornerback, wide receiver, guard, edge rusher for that matter, do you think if the right tackle falls, this team would jump on it?
Absolutely. Here's what's the blessing that Brad Holmes said at the owners meeting that this team is in right now, where they really, if they fall in love with any player, it could be a quarterback, it could be anybody, running back. They are not locked in. Brad Holmes has said it, and now we have to believe it. It's not position of need. We all think cornerback, edge rusher, interior defensive line, sure up that defense. But Brad has said it, and this is his strategy. He said, we can tidy up depth in free agency, and we can build with best player available. So when you look at everything and you look at how the draft board is going to shake out, I think there's an opportunity to take an offensive lineman. I think that the the situation now coming in regards to looking to replace Taylor Decker, absolutely. You're going to have an aging offensive line. You could take Jackson Powers if he's there.
Yep.
So, in my opinion, everything is on the board. The Lions are not going by position. Clearly, they are not going to go by, oh, we need a running back or we need we have to have an edge rusher. No, they're going to look through the entire board that they have set up, and they're going to find the guy that they believe fits at number 29. It can be at any position. And clearly, what we know now, cemented, it's going to be best player available. And so I would not be surprised at all if it's an offensive lineman, because I think the loss of Jonah Jackson is and I wish Joe was here. We had a debate. I was kind of hoping the Lions would target Robert Hunt over Zeitler.
Yeah.
And Joe was in love with I'm like, yeah, but you're talking about what he could produce last year. Is he going to produce that same amount this year? The football, when you got two offensive linemen in their 30s and you got Taylor Decker as well entering the 30s, and with all the wear and tear on his body, along with Frank Ragnow, that's a lot of hope that nobody breaks down along the offensive line. So for Brad Holmes, he said it, and Dan Campbell as well. The reason why the opportunity is there is they've built through the draft and free agency that they can go in a variety of ways, and everything can work out. Like I said, day one pick doesn't even have to start, and you hope that they're competitive enough to try. But to me, in now when you're raising ticket prices and you're seeing the way the rules have changed, where basically you can't tackle, you can't wrap anybody up and bring them to the ground. Good luck teaching all these guys how to tackle. I look at it like, you know what? If there's an elite wide receiver, if Leggett's there, if Keon Coleman's there, I double down and I make that offense elite, and I go and get a wide receiver. If I'm hoping it's Keon Coleman for personal reasons, but in my mind, if you get a game changer on offense, you go do it as well, because you still have a couple pieces in depth that you have on your roster. But I do think they're going to target the offensive line, if not in the first round, at least in day 2 or day 3, at least early on in round 2 or in the first 100 picks for sure.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And if you look at our situation for us, a big strike, well, not necessarily a strike, but I think a big knock on Fashanu was the age, and they felt like he wasn't physically mature enough.
Mm-hmm.
But you put him in a situation here in Detroit where, as you said, he doesn't have to play right away. Like, this is a guy who can sit behind Decker for a year, really get acclimated with the NFL game, get into an NFL weight room, learn how to be a pro from two of the best in the league, one of the best offensive line coaches in the league, and you have a guy who could be starting at left tackle at the tender age of 22 years old, right next with Penei Sewell at the other end, and you have something great for years. But I agree also. Do you think that the possibility of them trading up for a wide receivers there, if a guy falls?
To me, if they trade up, it's going to be for Quinion Mitchell or Darius Robinson, I think, for defense. If they trade up, if they fall in love with the edge guy, I think you go with guys that fit the bill. Mitchell, in my mind, is somebody that's really, when you see his tape, he can shut people down. In 2 years, he can be somebody that's worthwhile. I think that when you look at it, Darius Robinson, somebody that clearly loves the Lions, has an attachment to the organization. I'm hoping that something happens and he's there, but I think if they trade up, it's going to be for someone they love on defense. I don't see it. I think that the Lions covet their draft capital. Unless they're really fearful that the guy that they've all fallen in love with is going to be gone, then they do it. But potentially speaking, if you want to say this is the year and you take a chance, I would try and go for 2 first-round picks. Get that, sacrifice. You look at some of the deals that are made. Some of the deals are not even involving 24 draft picks in 24. They're going into 25. So if you can – if you can extend it further down the road, I would not mind trading next year's first rounder to move up and have another pick there. Could you imagine you get Jackson Powers at 29 and you get like Darius Robinson or Mitchell earlier in the draft, or you get somebody that you fall in love with, or you move up and you get one of the premier wide receivers early on. So the opportunity to be aggressive is there, but I think if they move up, I think it'll be for a cornerback, because you don't find too many that are shut down and have that skill set. I mean, he's the best. He is clearly the best. And the one thing that we don't know is, what does Brad Holmes think of him? Because he keeps that to the vest. He still hasn't drafted a cornerback yet. So I'm curious to see if they're going to be aggressive to move up. But I think the odds are, if they do trade, I wouldn't put it past them to acquire more capital or a veteran player by trading down, not having a first round pick at all, adding more into the draft, because I think there's a round, I think it's fourth round or so, that they don't have a pick at all. So there's an opportunities to gain some capital in that fashion. So that's the best part of this draft. Anything can happen, and nothing will surprise me in any way. I wouldn't be surprised if they moved up for a quarterback. I would not be surprised at all. Anything at all is available when you look at what Brad Holmes says in regards to, if we like a player and we want to invest in them and they hit all the targets, they'll go get them. They don't care what position it is. Best player available. Now, is it a position of need? No. But in my mind, you look at how everything shakes out in the NFL. If they fall in love with one of those flamethrowers, well, you never know. But I think we can safely say that Hendon Hooker is the guy firmly that's expected to be the incumbent backup. But you never know, man. Competition at quarterback is great. And Sudfeld's not going to compete really with Hooker to be the backup. He's clearly going to be the number 3. So I'm excited to see it, because everything can happen that day. And I'm excited to see what he's going to put together.
Cool. You mentioned Darius Robinson, which I found interesting because he's a name that has kind of quieted down a little bit since the Senior Bowl. Do you think they value Robinson's size and athleticism, playing that 4-2-5 defensive end, a little bit more than a guy like Dallas Turner, who may be more explosive, more productive, played against a little bit better competition, has a longer resume of productivity? Because you're looking at a guy in Darius who's 6'4 and a half, 265, 270 in that range, a guy that can play defensive end in multiple fronts. And then you got a guy like Dallas Turner, who's right out of that Will Anderson mold, a guy who's 6'3 and a half, 250 pounds, can play the run, but he's a natural born pass rusher. So do you think they value someone who has more versatility and bigger to play that role in their defense over a Dallas Turner?
I do. I think that clearly, when you look at adding a new defensive line coach, you hope that this time around it's going to work out. I think it will. Terrence Williams is definitely experienced, really highly regarded, and I think could take a young talent and turn a player into a very versatile player. And that's what the Lions like. They like players that can do a bunch of different things. And if you can get someone that can play multiple spots and cause some mismatches, oh my goodness, the value. I mean, anybody, listen, if you add Dallas Turner or Darius Robinson to your organization, you're going to have a good day, a good draft. You can sleep good at night. Dallas Turner, I think, is a top 10 pick. So I think that aggressiveness is, I don't know if the Lions will go into the top 10. I feel like if they move up, they're probably going to go in that window of 12 to 15, to get someone, because a good player can be there. But I'm curious your thoughts, because you talked about Penn State. I know a lot of people are talking about Chop Robinson. I see the potential, but I could see where fans would like it. But I just feel like his game is a little bit not as refined as some of the others that you see in the first round. So at 29, I just think that, I have him probably more of a second round grade than I would a first round. I wonder if the Lions feel the same. I wonder what you think about his game. I see the glimpses. I just don't see it just yet fitting in. I think that's why the opportunity's there. That's why people keep mocking him to the Lions, because they can take him and they can sit him down and have him learn behind James Houston and behind, Marcus Davenport and things like that. So there's an opportunity there, but I just think that, to me, Chop Robinson is ultra safe in my mind.
Yeah, I view Chop Robinson as another project. He reminds me a lot of Nolan Smith from Georgia from a year ago. Even though I think he's a better – let me put this out there. First of all, neither one of those guys coming out of college, Penn State and Georgia respectively, are polished pass rushers.
Right.
At all. Nolan Smith was a lot better against the run, I believe, in college than Chop is. But ask Eagle fans what they think of Nolan Smith right now. So it's Chop. I agree. I think he's a project. I see a guy that's getting by off pure athleticism with the undersized body.
Correct.
I think he's probably on that Penn State defense from a year ago. Probably was their third best edge rusher. If you're talking about just pure talent, as far as getting to the quarterback. But people look at these guys. This guy was on Feldman's freak list, and this guy was on this guy's freaks list, and all this other stuff. And I think they start overblowing up some of these players. I don't think Chop was ever a first round pick. A lot of times in the media, we view guys a certain way, and then on draft night we find out, oh damn, we thought this guy was a top 4 pick. Look at Will Levis from a year ago. Like everyone heading into the draft thought Will Levis was a top 5 pick, and what happened? Year before that, every Lions fans thought that there was a realistic chance that Malik Willis would be the number 2 overall pick. The night before the draft, I believed it. I was one of those fools. I believed it. So yeah, it's odd, man. It's odd, but I think overall this is a team that Brad Holmes does a good enough job early in free agency of masking his hand, so that way heading into the draft, nobody thinks we're desperate. I think we're the one team in the league nobody has no damn idea on what Brad Holmes and the Lions are going to do, because they can shock you. They can definitely shock you. It could be a tackle. And we never say never, because there's always 1 or 2 guys in the first round that find their way to you. A guy that was supposed to go in the top 10, the next thing you know, oh, this guy's at 17. And I think the window for Detroit, because I agree, I don't think they want to give up too much draft capital. I think the window is if they see a guy that they really like that's there at 17, now they can start getting on the phone. Mm-hmm. I would much rather trade up capital-wise from 29 to 17 over 29 to 8. Correct. Or 29 to 9, whatever. But, I mean, I agree with you. And I didn't really think about this at first, but 2 first-round picks,
for this team,
Quinyon Mitchell and Dallas Turner.
Yeah.
It could be anything.
Exactly. Now, I know I missed the first part of your guys' chat. Did you guys rap a little bit about Cam Sutton and all the nonsense with what he did? And it's interesting because to me, when you look at a player, okay, outside of the impact that it's going to have on the roster, he would have been, I thought, a solid cornerback at the 2 spot. I thought opposite of, I feel like the move to add Carlton Davis was to complement Cam Sutton. You get a bigger bodied guy, and you have a Cam Sutton who's a little bit more of a veteran and uses angles and things like that. I thought would have been a positive. So for Cam Sutton, what I can't shake, and I know it's I'm not making light of it, but a guy like me can only think, you're in the building. You knew something happened in your family that was pretty aggressive. You're just going to show up to work like it's never going to happen. Like you're gambling that they're not, like, potentially nobody's going to come talk to you about this potential warrant that's out there. Like you're just going to, and I just keep picturing it for the last 4 days. Like you're working out, you're getting your sets in, and all of a sudden the door opens and like 3 dudes walk in and are like, Cam, what's this? Like that moment when you realize, oh snap, I'm in trouble. And like, what's the first thing you think? What's the first thing you do? I mean, if the organization tells you go turn yourself in, it just reeks of guilt in my mind that he's still out on the loose. Like it's been another week, 2 weeks, he's still on the loose. I say in this day and age, you can come back in the NFL from a lot of things. If you didn't do something and you can get your people to support you, it's basically a one-day story. You turn yourself in and you get the process started. He could have kept his career, maybe not in Detroit, but his career is over based on what happened. And outside of the seriousness of what happened, I think that it does potentially, to me, indicate that probably a cornerback will be drafted. But I think they probably look later on. I think TJ Tampa is a player that they would like maybe on day 2 or in the second round. So I'm seeing potential for others as well to come in And there's a lot of depth at that position. But I just can't stop thinking about Cam Sutton's working out and has to address, like, what do the Lions say? Like, what is this about? We've gotten word that you've got a warrant out for your arrest. It's like, we got a problem. Yeah. And I honestly didn't think they'd do it 24 hours later. I just thought they'd wait for the legal matter. But the seriousness of being AWOL from the law is when you're missing and you're somebody that is of that caliber. They didn't waste no time. 24 hours later, he was gone. And it just was a wild saga to think about. But I think it does have a little bit of a ramification on the draft that they have to look maybe at that cornerback spot, because I do think that you cannot go into the season with Carlton Davis and Amik Robertson. I just think that's not good enough. And Mosley is still a question mark regarding his injury and where he's going to be at. So the Cam Sutton situation, outside of that, I think has hurt potentially the planning in regards to the draft, because you may not have felt like you needed a cornerback in the draft, but now you maybe have to use a pick to get one.
Yeah, I think they always needed one.
Yeah.
Whether they wanted to publicly admit it or not. But I agree. I think the Carlton Davis signing was meant for them to play more split field coverages. Being able to sit Cam Sutton into the situation where it fits him better. He can play his zone coverage, mix him up a little bit of man against the number 2, maybe the number 3 every now and then. And Carlton can play more man on the back half of the backside or whatever. But yeah, I still don't believe that the cornerback position was ever out of play, even before the Cam Sutton situation. You know, I keep going back to the athletic freaks that come into this league at the wide receiver position every year. Look at Legette, who I compared a lot to Andre Johnson, even though I think Andre Johnson is better coming out of Miami than Legette is coming out of South Carolina. But it's difficult to really evaluate those players because that scheme at South Carolina was so wacky and up and down, and the route concepts and the offensive line play was bad. And with all that being so prevalent when it comes to the inconsistencies, you had Spencer Rattler, who was inconsistent, so his receivers' numbers were going to be inconsistent. But I do agree. I think Legette is a guy that once he gets into an NFL offense, because people may look at guys with his type of skill set, the way they looked at DK Metcalf, the way they looked at Calvin Johnson. These guys have a specific set of skills. They're going to run about 4 routes for you. Yep. They're dudes. I'm 6'1", 6'2". I'm 220 pounds plus. I'm bigger, faster, stronger than everybody, and that's what my calling card is. So do I expect guys like that to run really fast, short shuttles and 3-cone drills? No, I don't. But I do believe this offense needs a dude. Even though I think Laporta's a dude. I think he's a dude. I think St. Brown is a dude in his own way. But I still believe we need that dude as an X-Y receiver now. Could J-Mo shock everybody and become Alabama J-Mo? Where I think, and I always felt that J-Mo had a 14 to 15 touchdown season in him. And I think that he proved a lot in that NFC Championship game. We lost, but to see him play well on a stage that big, coming from the situation he came from with the drops, fans being in and out on him, talking bad about him, critiquing every single thing the kid did. And for him to come up big and score 2 touchdowns in the NFC Championship, I felt that was a good omen heading into next season. So, I mean, it's a little conflicting because we all expect J-Mo to be a lot better. Laporta's a dude. St. Brown's a dude. Jameer's a dude. Sewell's the dude of all dudes. But, you know, it's like we're still missing that X.
Correct.
But
there is a guy too, Antoine Green. He's raw, but he's got the size, and I think the opportunity is going to be given to him to earn some time. I don't see 14, 15 touchdowns for J-Mo, because when you got Gibbs, Montgomery, and St. Brown and Laporta, that's a lot of touchdowns. I think if you can just get him between 8 and 12, that's great. That's a good jump. And we just got to get him in the neighborhood of 800 receiving yards, anywhere near close to that. I think that, you know, he's still young. That's just crazy. He's only going to be 23 years old. So he's going to be still earning starter reps and things like that. So Jameson Williams, I think he's a player that the organization respects because of his speed, and they're going to give him the time to figure it out. But yeah, it's a big year. He's got to take a jump. He can't be targeted twice in this offense. With Josh Reynolds leaving, you got to go out there and take those reps. And that's all I said I wanted him to. When people were saying, well, what stats and things like that? Yeah, stats are important, touchdowns, but I want him to command the ball, ask for targets, get some numbers, get the ball targeted towards you 8 times and get utilized. So in my opinion, I think it's something that is, a hope for this offense is that they're going to have an opportunity. And you look at it when you got the free agent signings that they had, I thought that they shored up the defense pretty well in regards to adding Marcus Davenport, DJ Reader, the offensive line with Zeitler, I felt like was shored up. And so for me, I was satisfied. But to me, I would have liked that one splash when we look at free agency as a whole. I am curious, though, in free agency. I'm curious because both Dan and Brad have kind of had conflicting thoughts in regards to the Lions needing a cornerback still maybe in free agency. Look, free agency was decent. Robertson, Carlton Davis, I think are very much in line with what people want to see. Keeping Graham Glasgow in town definitely made a lot of people feel comfortable. So in my mind, B plus grade. I think it's professional. You upgraded, at least you upgraded the defensive backs room. You still can get better, but do you see one more move? Because I think everybody loves Stephon Gilmore, but I'm like, man, he's still he's a guy that I think is, can be a mentor to a lot of these dudes, but I'm like, the option that seems like it checks every single box is Marshawn Lattimore, but you got to give up capital and pay him money. So it maybe doesn't check off the financial box, but I'm curious. Do you think they're done in free agency, or do you get that corner? Do you add him up and say, hey, Stephon Gilmore, come and play 1 year in Detroit? I think it's okay, but I think he's overhyped in regards to where he's at. You're not getting the Patriots, Stephon Gilmore. You're basically getting a veteran that here or there can get you what you need. And you're going to take away reps from Mosley. You're going to take away reps from the younger Gilmore, who probably should take a step forward and get more reps. So, Khalil Dorsey, you never know what you're looking at in regards to the cornerbacks room. But it has a feeling like maybe they make that call, but I don't feel like I'm as impressed as online is for sure with the fans. I just feel like, you know what? Be done with free agency and potentially look in the draft and get a young cornerback that you can develop.
Well, I mean, we got another 4 months, 4.5 months before the season starts. I think if my math is somewhat okay.
Yep.
I think it all depends on what happens in the draft. I was shocked that they let last year's draft come and go without taking one of those corners in last year's draft, whether it be via first round, second round, or even third round for that matter. But yeah, it's if they don't take a corner, especially if they don't take a corner early, I think it's a bet. It's a solid bet that somewhere around late July, maybe after the first set of June cuts, July, August, they get at least 2 more corners. I think because
two more.
You can't, you don't know what you're going to get from Mosley. That's for sure. Cam Sutton's gone. Jerry Jacobs is gone. So you don't know really what you're going to get. We've heard rumors about Branch potentially playing more safety this year. I don't know what type of signs that sends towards what's going to happen in the draft. But cornerback is still huge, man. It's still huge. And like the Stephon Gilmore thing is, he's a name. And I can't say it's just that he's a name because Stephon Gilmore has still played well. He played well in New England. Mm-hmm. He played well for Dallas a year ago. He played well for the Colts the year prior to that. He's just old.
Yeah.
It's you kind of get that feeling where you want them to go get a young stud. Like I don't want you guys to just keep. It seems like the well is going to run dry with some of these old dudes eventually.
Yeah.
And I'm just fearful that Gilmore gets over here and stinks.
Right.
He turns out to be Cam Sutton. But I don't
Right.
think that'll happen because Gilmore's one hell of a player. That's how it is. But yeah, you're talking to
Is
somebody that's been pounded the table for corner for like 15 years, man.
whew,
Like I wanted Christian Gonzalez a year ago. Now, granted, if we would have taken Gonzalez, there's no guarantee we would have gotten player A, B, C, D, or whatever it may be. But that was a guy that I wanted. We heard Witherspoon was a guy that they wanted a year ago. Dan
exactly.
Davis says, "Hey, Steven Nelson and or Dory Jackson could be cheaper options at CB if Brad wanted to look at either one of those guys." Yeah, Dory's what 27, I think, 27 or 28. He doesn't really move the needle for me at all either. So we've never had that needle moving player at corner. You know, the Seattle Seahawks draft Sean Springs, we draft Bryant Westbrook. You know, the Atlanta Falcons draft AJ Terrell, we draft Jeff Okuda. Like, things don't happen. The Vikings draft Randy Moss, we draft what? Was it Terry Fair that year or Kevin Abrams?
Terry Fair, I think. Yep.
Yeah. Can we go get a dude, man? I'm glad you came on and you said what you said because I've been pounded the table for Quinshawn Mitchell. I called him
Yeah.
a bigger, faster version of Darrell Reeves.
Yeah, get him. He's the best. He's clear. It jumps off on tape. So, is DJ Reader the best free agent signing they made this year? I think it's the most safe. I know that quad muscle is serious, but it seems like he's motivated to come back. I think Marcus Davenport is the biggest risk that you took, but somebody that they know. But in my mind, I think DJ Reader playing alongside Aleem McNeil has the potential to be very positive. I think that's the best signing that they made, and one in which I know satisfied a lot of fans when people were wondering, Brad, do something. And I think it's a reasonable contract. I think he's a violent player, and I think he's going to work hard to prove that he belongs. I think he's a Dan Campbell guy. I love the fact he was tweeting during the playoffs, showing love to the Lions. That's always a good sign. And I think he's going to be a good culture fit. So I feel like, the debate is probably him or Carlton Davis. I think Amik Robertson's underrated. He'll perform. But that cornerback spot, it's tough, man. It's a tough position. And now they made it harder to tackle. The rules make it hard to play the position. You can't tackle it. I feel like cornerbacks are just going to be like stepping aside and letting these dudes go. Because if you wrap somebody up, that's the position I think linebackers and cornerbacks are going to be the ones that are going to be like struggling with the new rules. So that plays a factor. I think that you're like, you know what, are we going to invest more in cornerbacks because everybody loves Patrick Surtain? And do you make a big investment and get him? But I just think that probably the free agency is going to be probably quiet. Maybe it's an Adoree Jackson, but I think it's going to be quiet in a move that's not going to be a big splash move. You just go in the draft. You get younger. You get a couple guys that you feel like can develop, and you go with what brought you to the dance. You're just hoping that Emmanuel Mosley can be somebody that rebounds. Hopefully he's ready by the season in my mind, but I think DJ Reader's the safest, but Davenport maybe is the wild card that can come in. If he turns it around, Marcus Davenport can be ridiculously violent and do some things on the defensive line.
No, I agree. I think health has been the biggest issue for Marcus his first few years in the league.
Yep.
When he was healthy, back in 2021, he had the best season of his career. I believe he had 9 sacks that year. But you talk about a guy that's huge. A guy that's huge. He can play some 3 technique if you want to. He can play some 4. He can line up at the 5. And when he gets going, he's an issue to deal with. Like you said, he's a big, violent, physical dude who can pressure the quarterback. And more importantly, within that 4-2-5, he can play the defensive end in that situation because he's big and athletic enough to run contain on a running game. So he's kind of what you want prototypically. If they hit on him, and that's the thing, if he's healthy, because he had a ton of injuries a year ago, if they hit on Davenport, they may have really gotten something for cheap.
Yep.
I know Brad loves getting it all for cheap.
I know.
He wants, if it works, they got something there.
It's crazy because I see Dan Davis wants the reunion with Quandre Diggs. I don't see it. You got 3 good ones. You probably could draft another one. So in my mind, I don't see it, but it would be a good reunion, and it would be an opportunity to have a guy kind of bring his career full circle. So in my mind, free agency was good. The team's better. I think that, the opportunity now for this football team is to turn the corner and start looking at kind of the depth pieces and who's going to compete where. And you're going to add competition in multiple spots. So in my mind, it was a happy time. I thought it was great to hear Rod Wood drop the hammer on the league, calling the league and Troy Vincent asking him, hey, are you praying for the officiating to get better? I thought finally that was good to hear publicly, to drop the hammer. So it was a good week for the Lions. And I think that the future is bright, like Dan Campbell said, but he said something that we'll talk about probably in a couple of weeks when we come back and talk. He said he's got to ratchet up the intensity to make sure that this team doesn't get complacent and fall off. Look, you can't help it. The football world loves this team. Amon-Ra getting a lot of love, Goff a lot of love, Aiden a lot of love. It's hard to not read some of your press clippings. So we'll see how this football team, after some competitions added in the draft and who comes in, how this football team responds to success, because that schedule is not easy. And I'm excited because at least we're talking in hopeful terms. And it seems like everything that Brad does, people are okay with, even the departures. I love how fast people turned on Josh Reynolds and Jonah Jackson. Like, these guys are just nobodies. Okay, they're impactful players. CD Deuce is gone. So you lost a good chunk of talent. Let's see if Brad Holmes is good at replenishing that talent. It looks okay on paper, but you did get a little bit worse in regards to some guys that left. Chemistry, you can't just build, and you just let go of a veteran receiver to the Broncos. So we'll see the impact of losing Josh Reynolds. Does JMO step up? So it was a good time, man. I enjoyed catching up. I can't wait to do it again in a couple weeks when we start getting some more noise regarding the draft, man. It was fun. It was a good free agency, a little wild, but in the end, this football team's in the best spot, I think, to take the North again in 24.
Welcome to the Detroit Lions News Show, your number one source for Detroit Lions news.
But when I see Dan Campbell handling the clock the way he has over the last 3 years, same shit.